Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to health care, health and healthcare. Oh my God. My name is Amy.
And my name is Sarah.
And we are your Gritty Nurses.
So today our topic is going to be situations in which you were involved as a bystander, but not actually in your place of work. So healthcare situations that happened while you were out in public or at home, or basically while you weren't on the clock.
Yeah, so I'm a nurse. I'm a doctor. Am I going to run out to help? We'll see. Let's talk about how those situations may go.
So I guess the most recent example I haven't told very many people this, is I was at Walmart one day shopping, and I come out and there's a crowd that's formed around the road. There's already there's two women that are on the ground, and so basically it was an incident where a van hit two elderly women. So one woman is on the ground unconscious. There's a Canada Post worker that's performing CPR on her, but she's completely unresponsive. And then her friend is crying on the side of the road. She's sitting on the curb. She's still conscious, but she's basically holding her left shoulder. And the crowd has already formed. So then I guess me being a nurse, I feel like I need to be involved right away.
Right.
But like at the same time, things are already happening. I believe that the accident happened maybe 10 minutes before I got out of the store, which is a really long time for the ambulance not to have shown up.
Right.
And just the weirdest things I remember. So like the woman had just finished shopping at Walmart, so there's eggs that are still strewn onto the road. They've been cracked because, the car hit them and things went flying. And I remember the woman that was on the ground had blood coming out of her ear.
Oh my God.
So that can't be a good thing. So basically I stepped up to the person that was performing CPR and I said to them, hey, I'm a nurse. Let me know if you want to switch off. I can continue CPR. But I think just because of how focused they were on the situation, they didn't really hear me.
Right.
So I wasn't about to push my way to help. And then just around that time, that's when the ambulance showed up. So 2 ambulances showed up, one for each woman. I actually thought the second woman that was still conscious, I thought maybe she was having a stroke because she kept holding her left shoulder. But I think she was explaining to bystanders that no, she got hit on her left side.
Oh.
And that's what it was. So basically, each ambulance and each paramedic went to attend to each woman. The woman that was on the ground, she was still completely unresponsive. So the paramedic got there and they took a pair of scissors and they cut her top open.
Whoa.
And I kept thinking, oh man, I hope that she's got something on underneath. I would just feel really embarrassed for her if she didn't.
Right.
Thankfully she did. And they continued to work away at her. And I remember them at some point taking her off of the pavement and loading her onto the stretcher where they continued CPR. And I could tell they were pushing with quite a bit of force because the whole mattress was basically moving with
God.
every compression they were making. And so they put her in the ambulance and took her away. And then the second woman, I remember them loading all of the stuff onto the bottom of the stretcher, including her friend's personal belongings. And they took her away as well.
Right.
But the thing that sort of bothered me is that the crowd that had formed, there was about 10 or 15 people. And of course, people are making videos on their phone, which really bothered me. And I asked some of them to stop. And of course, they pretended they didn't hear me. But like, just think about it. If this was your mom or this was your grandmother or your sister, what good is it gonna have to have someone making videos? Like, honestly,
Right.
It's just not respectful. And I did find out later that the one woman passed away. And so I think it was Toronto's, 20 or 25th fatality of the year. So I think for me, it was just knowing that I felt like I could, if I had left the grocery store maybe 10 minutes earlier, maybe I could have called an ambulance sooner or I could have started CPR sooner. So for me, it was just sort of what could I have done? And just sort of feeling helpless because of the way the situation unfolded. One of the women didn't make it. The other one was probably okay, but I really didn't get any closure.
Yeah.
So I think in those situations, it's just knowing that you are a nurse by training, but you actually do what you can in the situation. So for me, I thought maybe I could have done a bit more crowd control. I did tell people that were making videos to put their phones away, but I don't know if things would have been different if I'd been there a little bit earlier.
Yeah, I think you're being really, really hard on yourself. Like, I think the fact that you stepped up to the plate, because the other point, I guess, part to this is as a do you have an obligation to actually stop to take care of someone, whether you're a healthcare professional or not? Well, that's more of an ethical question, because
Right.
obviously, and I know this sounds horrible, you don't have to, right? You could just
Right.
stand back and you could do nothing. But the fact that you went in and you tried to offer your services and you tried to say, hey, like, let me help, or you told people to stop recording, I think you did a lot more than you think you did. Like, even though you weren't able to get in there and do CPR, I think you did
Right.
a really good job of whatever, because you didn't have to contribute, you didn't have to stop. You could have been like, oh man, this is not my problem,
Yeah.
and walked
Yeah.
off, right? And I mean, there are people that may encounter a situation like that, and if they make that decision, that's their own decision. Like, I can't say to someone that you have to stop. But I think at the end of the day, if we are healthcare professionals, I think it's something we should try to do. Like, even if you don't feel comfortable doing that CPR, I think even if you're helping with crowd control, or you're saying, hey, you shouldn't be taking video because this is someone's loved one, or instead of taking a video, why don't you call for additional help? Like, I think any of those things are admirable to stop, because like you don't have to, and if you're taking the time to do it, I think that's a really good thing to do.
Yeah, and I think we obviously don't take an oath to say that we have to help in these situations, but I think
Right.
most nurses would, just by virtue of our training and the type of people we are. We're in health care helping professions.
Yeah,
So-
and I mean, like, to be honest, I've had similar encounters, not as grave as your particular situation, but there has been lots of times where I've been either in a mall, or a situation where someone is like unconscious, or I think we were at like a Bramley City Center, and some old lady passed out, and I was walking past her on the escalator, and my husband bumps me. He's like, "You're a nurse, you gotta stop by." And I was like, "Oh!" I was like, I know you just like that. In that moment, I was just like, "Oh, I don't want to," but I was just like, nobody was helping her, and I was like, "Shit, fine." So like, I walked over, and I think she had heat stroke, so I was helping with crowd control, and then I asked some people to get her water. So this gentleman went into his shop and got her a bottle of water, and we were continuing to fan her until the ambulance came. And then like, I took some initial vitals. I think I just did like her heart rate or whatever, and just kind of gave them that information. But I did have another situation where I was actually at a funeral, and I think this particular person just got really overwhelmed and just kind of like passed out. And I saw the person like slump over, and of course Jordan's next to me. He's like elbowing me, and I'm like,
Again.
"Oh no, I can't! Not again, not again!" And I kind of went over, and I think it was just through all of the emotions that this person was experiencing at this funeral, that they just got very overwhelmed. But they did need that extra set of hands to kind of go help, and I get it too. Like, I get the fact that being a bystander, sometimes you're just in shock, or maybe it's like, you know what, I just finished my 12-hour shift, or I don't want to because I'm afraid of legalities. Like, I know here in Canada we have the Good Samaritans Act, and I'm pretty sure that's other places as well.
Yeah. So it's basically something that says that if you are a bystander and you see someone that obviously needs help and there's no one around them to help, so if someone's unconscious, you are protected by law if you help out, even if the outcome isn't good.
Right.
So let's say you go to help out, you're performing CPR on someone that's unconscious, they end up passing away. There is nothing to say that you are going to be sued for causing that death if you acted in good faith and your intent was to help that person and there weren't any other options at that time.
Right. And I think with CPR, even just kind of going back to that, a lot of people are afraid of doing mouth to mouth. Like, I think there's more than enough evidence now that's like, if you just do the compressions, that is even more efficient than giving the 2 breaths, because I think most people aren't really good with giving the 2 breaths. So just do the compressions. And I think the thing is staying alive. I don't want to sing.
Yeah. But you know what is
but
a
the
pet
beat
peeve?
of staying alive, yeah.
Just as an aside, a pet peeve of mine is that I never ever see CPR being performed correctly in TVs and movies.
Oh God.
They're always bending their elbows. Like, I'm like, keep your damn elbows straight. How are you
Yes.
gonna get the force that you need if you're not right up on the bed or
Right.
doing that? So that's just my pet
maybe
peeve.
well, why don't we tell our listeners like just a couple good tips on how to do good CPR?
Well, number one is that you can't actually perform CPR effectively for more than a few minutes at a time.
Right.
So if there's a second person, you need to switch off with
Absolutely.
that person. I mean, you can be the hero and you think you're performing it correctly, but I've been in high fidelity situations where we've proven that to be incorrect, even for someone that is really strong.
Right. And I think when you have two bystanders, you would be doing the 2 to 30 rule. So 2 breaths, 30 compressions, and then you switch off. But I think if you don't want to give any breaths and you're concerned about that aspect, then you're going to just do compression. So you're trying to get about 100 compressions in it's a 2-minute period, 60-second period, 60 seconds. It's a lot of compressions.
Yeah, and I think it's okay if you don't get the exact timing right. The fact is you're just trying to get that heart started again. So
Right.
whether it's too slow or too fast, I remember taking a CPR course and they said, you know what? If you don't do it right or you don't do anything, they're dead, right?
Right.
So whatever you do is probably going to help that person at least, get their vital signs back.
Yeah, and then even like let's say you don't know where to landmark your hands, you don't know where to put your hands. Just visualize typically where you think their nipples are and go right to the center. That's probably a good point. And then the other thing is you want to go about 2 inches deep. So, and we're talking about adults, we're not talking about children. So, for adults, you're looking at doing about 2 inches deep, which is you're pushing hard and fast. Really hard.
And I think also if you're in a situation like this, really just think about afterwards. Are you needing some sort of support? Like, do you need to debrief in some way? Because in the hospital setting, when we have a code, usually there's a protocol for debriefing, or your manager will tell you to seek out employee assistance, someone that you could talk to that's impartial. So if you feel like you need to just talk to someone about it, make sure you do that and don't let it sort of eat away at you. Make sure that you deal with the emotional part of it, especially if it was something that didn't go well.
Yeah, and I was going to even ask you, Sarah, now I'm going to bug you. I'm going to pick on you now. So how do you feel? Because that must have been really traumatic to see. Like, I haven't seen any accidents. Oh, actually I did, but I was driving past. But like, I haven't seen anything to that nature. So how do you feel? And do you feel that talking about it's helping, or like...
I mean, I did talk about it with a few people, and I think since then I've had a lot of change in my life. So I had other things that were sort of more pressing in terms of talking to a counselor. So I do feel like I don't feel like I was overly affected by it, only because I don't think that there was anything really I could have done differently. So,
right.
And like, I suppose if these were younger people, I might have been more affected. I feel like they were older and maybe they had underlying issues to begin with, but I feel like even talking to you right now, it's sort of helped me understand that I did what I could. Mm-hmm. I mean, I probably did a lot more than other people would have done. So I don't know. I think it's just really checking in with yourself often and seeing if it's affecting your sleep, or maybe you're thinking about it a lot. Maybe you're experiencing some signs of post-traumatic stress,
right?
And you need to talk to someone about it. So for me, I feel like I've been in situations where the outcome was fine, and I've been more affected by that than this situation where the outcome wasn't so great. And because I saw the resuscitation happening, I do feel like they got adequate care and that sort of thing, and they were both taken to the hospital. So I think that's another takeaway, is that when you're in a situation where there's a code, even though I wasn't their family, but if there is family around or friends, letting them see the full resuscitation really helps. And I have that personal experience now to say that that is true.
Yeah, and I think it gives a sense of closure to families to see that, like, people are trying to do everything that they possibly can to help. But the other piece I kind of was thinking about and just kind of came to mind was, as a bystander, if you are going in, always assess the situation for safety as well, right? You don't want to run in and then now you're the next person who ends up being a fatality. So like, for example, let's say there was an electrocution and there's live wire, or there was a drowning or something happened. You just want to also make sure that you assess the situation for your own safety and for your own protection before you kind of jump in to help. So
yeah,
always make sure that you're safe too. Yeah.
And I can think back to lifeguarding training. When I was training to be a lifeguard, jumping into the water is a perfect example. So let's say someone is struggling in the water. what you want to do is offer them something to grab onto. It's actually the last resort for you to jump in completely without any sort of flotation device, because chances are if that person is bigger or stronger than you, they're going to pull you under.
Yep,
because
I did that to my cousin.
because they're panicking, right? They're panicking, they don't know what to do. So like that would be a perfect example of just really assessing the situation, feeling like you maybe have other options before you completely jump in 2 feet in.
Yeah.
And that's important as well. And also, I guess, like, maybe in your situations, Amy, did you feel obligated to stay until the situation was resolved?
So I have, and of course, obviously, like, if I think in that particular situation at the funeral, we had childcare, but there was the situation where I was at the mall with this lady who had passed out, having my small kids in the chair beside me. I was kind of like, okay, I gotta figure. Well, they were in the stroller, I should say. I still felt compelled. I guess it was just for my own resolution to make sure that, now this person's being transferred off. I guess it's like my own nursing TOA.
Yeah.
I'm TOAing to the EMS. Oh my gosh, that's super
TOA
late.
stands for Transfer of Accountability,
Yes.
in case people
But
don't
I
know.
mean, I have felt compelled to kind of stay to the end just to make sure that, they get what they need and that they're kind of off. Yeah, like I mean, these situations aren't easy, and especially if you aren't a healthcare professional, like, what is it that you can do? And I think they're like, if you don't even if CPR is not what you want to do, there's a lot of other things that you could help with. Crowd control, calling EMS would be helpful. So calling 911, even telling people like you did, Sarah, to be like, turn your phone off. This is not appropriate. I think those are all really relevant things, and I think we should circle back to these people who are recording. And I think my first question is, why?
Exactly.
Like, what is the purpose?
This is not
of
entertainment,
recording?
okay? This is not something that you upload to YouTube or Facebook. Like, I
Yeah.
really don't know why you would need to record.
Yeah, this is someone's loved one. It's someone's friend. It's someone's sibling. Someone's child. Someone's parent. It's just inappropriate. And I think that we've just lost a little bit of that human touch to be like, hey, instead of recording this person, maybe I should go help them. I think for anyone to stand and record they need to really start evaluating why they would be doing something like that.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you really don't want to get hands-on but you want to help out, I would maybe take notes. Maybe either handwritten or on your phone, like the time and what's happening. Because when help does arrive, they'll probably want to know, how long has this person been unconscious? What has been done? When did they start CPR? So if it's something simple like that, maybe you could do that without violating that person's privacy.
Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, every little bit counts. So whether it's note taking, whether it's crowd control, whether it's you jumped in and you did CPR, I think all those things are admirable traits to have, and I think they're all really good things to do. But it's definitely not an easy situation.
And if you feel compelled to just sit beside that person and hold their hand,
that's okay.
That's
too.
okay too, if that's what they want.
And I think I was going to talk quickly about like stopping the bleed, because I think that's another important thing too. So for example, in the situation where Sarah saw someone being like hit by a car, there's many times where people, they jump to CPR first, actually, as opposed to stopping the bleed. And if someone is actually bleeding out and you do CPR, what are we doing?
Right.
We're helping pump the blood out faster. So really, if you are that first person on the scene and you feel comfortable enough, before even doing CPR, see if you can stop the bleed, whether that is grabbing a tourniquet and putting it over that area, or having something brace really hard against that area where there's bleeding coming from that person. You probably want to stop the bleed before you do CPR. So that's another really, really helpful tip, because that actually came from Sandy Hook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
very good.
Just for people who don't know, but I'll just kind of quickly tell you. So Sandy Hook there was an elementary school shooting where there was a lot of children who had gunshot wounds. And what happened were bystanders who were going to help were doing admirable things and jumping in, and they were doing CPR. And actually, when they did a quality review of what happened, a lot of these children actually ended up dying from blood loss. So what they wanted people to do was actually to stop the bleed first and then do CPR second. So if there's a lot of blood, stop the bleed, and then we do CPR.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anything else that you want to add?
Nothing that comes to mind, but I'm sure there'll be other situations in the future.
For sure. So if you don't feel compelled to, but if you can, try some of our tips if you're in a situation where you're stuck and you're that bystander and you need to provide some assistance to someone.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear any stories that you have as well. So very interested in that.
For sure.
If you like our podcast, please tell your friends. You can like, share, and subscribe. We are available on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.